The storm rolled over San Francisco like it had a score to settle. By the time the power went out across Pacific Heights, the streets were glassy with rain, and silence pressed against the windows of a mansion that almost never slept. Inside, 28-year-old Julian Mercer, a tech billionaire whose name filled headlines more than his heart ever could, returned home, expecting another quiet night. What he found instead would destroy everything he thought he knew. Before we dive in, tell me, what would you do if a child you'd never met whispered, "You made me a promise you don't remember," because that's exactly what she said to him. And in the next few minutes you'll see how one small voice unraveled an empire. When Julian stepped into his marble foyer, his motion sensors didn't blink. The generator hadn't kicked in. The whole house felt suspended, like it was waiting for him to notice something. He reached for the wall panel, but then he heard breathing. Soft, uneven, coming from the music room. He crossed the dark hall and pushed open the double doors. Lightning flashed through the tall windows, lighting the Steinway Grand in quick bursts of white. Behind the heavy velvet curtains, something shifted. He froze. A security breach, a stalker. The curtain moved again, and a small face appeared. A girl, barely 6. She had tangled brown hair, a rain-soaked sweater 2 sizes too big, and a backpack clutched tight against her chest. A scruffy dog with a red tag pressed close to her legs. "Who are you?" Julian asked. The girl straightened, chin trembling, but voice steady. "I'm Ava. I kept the promise you don't remember." For a moment he thought he'd misheard. Her words landed like a secret he'd never been told. What promise he managed. "My mom said if things got bad, come to the house with the chandelier that looks like falling stars," she said. "You'd know what to do." Julian turned slowly toward the foyer. The crystal chandelier hung like frozen rain, catching faint light from the storm. No one outside his inner circle even knew that description. Something was wrong. Too specific, too familiar. "How did you get in here?" She shrugged. Door was open. It wasn't. Then maybe it wanted me to come in. Julian almost smiled, but the security system had been armed. He typed the code to check the logs, and every entry blinked green as if the house had recorded no intrusion. The girl, the dog, and the open door simply existed. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, but her stomach answered with a quiet growl. He motioned toward the kitchen. "Let's get you something to eat." Ava followed him like she'd been there before, avoiding the antique table leg everyone hit their hip on, ducking under the chandelier chain in the corridor. When they reached the pantry, she stepped forward and pressed 4 digits on the keypad, 2929. The lock clicked open. Julian's chest tightened. That was his mother's birthday. He'd used it as a code once long ago before automating everything. "Who told you that number?" he asked. "My mom said you always use birthdays when you can't think," she said matter-of-factly, as if repeating a recipe. He swallowed hard. Whoever her mother was, she knew him, or at least she used to. He set a bowl of oatmeal and honey in front of her. She ate quietly, carefully, while the dog lay across her feet like a guardian. Only when she looked up did he notice the outline of something pressed against the fabric of her backpack. "What's in the bag?" he asked. She hesitated, then slid it toward him. Inside were a ferry ticket from Sausalito, a faded Polaroid of Julian himself playing piano on a city street, a paper crane, and a small round tin with a locket inside. The locket was etched with coordinates, 36.372, 121.9010. Big Sur. Julian stared at the photo. He didn't remember that moment. The smile, the street, the crowd, it looked like someone else's life. "Where did you get this?" "Mom took it," Ava said, "before you fell." "Fell?" She nodded. "On the scooter. She said you forgot some things after that." Julian's pulse quickened. He had fractured his skull 18 months ago. A mild concussion, the doctor had said. He never thought it had stolen anything more than a few hours. "What's your mother's name?" "Ava Elena," she said softly. "Elena Rivera." The name slid through his mind, searching for a memory that wasn't there. He shook his head. "I don't know her." Ava looked up from the table. "She said you might say that." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small folded note. "She said to give you this if you didn't remember." He unfolded the damp paper. The writing was neat, steady, and heartbreakingly simple. "If I can't, you must." The generator flickered to life for a second, throwing ghostly light across the kitchen. Julian caught sight of himself in the glass, tired eyes, expensive suit, and a child's world sitting at his marble counter. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He opened it without thinking. "You found her. Keep the coordinates safe." Another message followed before he could breathe. "We're coming for her." Julian looked toward the wide window. A pair of headlights swept across the driveway, then stopped. The dog lifted its head and growled low and certain. Ava's small fingers tightened around his sleeve. "Mr. Julian," she whispered. "Are they the bad ones?" He didn't answer. He turned off the kitchen light, pocketed the locket, and scanned the security feed. Static. Every camera was dead. Somewhere beyond the glass tires hissed in the rain. Someone was out there. He crouched beside her. "Listen, Ava, whatever happens, you stay with me, okay?" She nodded once, brave but trembling. As he reached for the emergency lock, he couldn't shake her words. "The promise you don't remember." And for the first time in years, Julian Mercer, the man who built an empire out of logic and code, felt something raw, human, and terrifying. The sense that this wasn't random, this was personal. Outside, a door slammed. The dog growled again, and somewhere deep in the dark, a piano note echoed through the storm, soft haunting, as if the house itself remembered what he could not. Rain still whispered against the windows when Julian finally convinced Ava to rest. She slept, curled up on the living room couch, harbor stretched at her feet, while the locket with its etched coordinates rested in Julian's palm. Every rational instinct told him to call the police. But something about the text messages, the way the cameras had gone dead, the knowledge in that little girl's eyes, none of it felt like a case for the cops. It felt like a message meant for him alone. He called Marcus as head of security before dawn. By the time the first gray light touched the glass walls of the mansion, Marcus was in the control room, surrounded by screens that showed nothing but static. "No sign of entry, no footage, no alarms tripped," Marcus said, shaking his head. "It's like she appeared out of thin air." "Check the servants' entrance," Julian said quietly. Last time that door was serviced, Marcus pulled up the log. 3 days ago. "You haven't had staff here since Wednesday. You've been working remote." Julian frowned. Then who opened it? Marcus hesitated. Someone who knew the codes, apparently. Julian's mind drifted to Ava's calm little hands, pressing 2929 into the keypad. Whoever Elena Rivera was, she'd known this house maybe before he did. When he returned to the living room, Ava was awake, hair a mess of soft curls. She sat cross-legged, sketching on a hotel notepad she must have found in his study. The drawing was simple but precise: a piano, a woman with long hair, a little girl, and a man with his head bowed over the keys. "Is that me?" he asked. She nodded. "You look different now." He smiled without meaning to. "Older," she tilted her head. "Lonelier." Her honesty hit harder than he expected. By late morning, a different kind of storm was building online chatter. Somehow, a gossip account had caught wind of a mystery child seen with Julian Mercer at his gate. He didn't know how, but someone was watching. His phone rang again. This time, it was Maya Chen, the photojournalist who lived 3 houses down and had been covering his foundation's charity work for years. "I saw the photo," she said before he could speak. That girl? Who is she? That's what I'm trying to find out. I have something you need to see, Maya said. Remember the community concert at Glide Memorial 2 summers ago, the one where you played piano for that fundraiser? Julian's heart stuttered. I don't remember playing at any concert. That's the problem, Maya said. You did, and you weren't alone. She arrived 20 minutes later with a folder of old prints. When she spread them on the table, Julian felt the ground shift beneath him. There he was, smiling, sleeves rolled up, playing piano in a crowded church hall. Beside him stood a woman in a denim jacket with a little girl clapping on her lap. The woman was Elena. The child was Ava. Maya studied his face. You really don't remember Julian, shook his head slowly. I had an accident last year, a concussion. Maybe I lost more than I realized. Maya leaned closer, pointing at the edge of one print. Look, her necklace, the same locket your girl's carrying. He picked up the photograph and turned it over. In faint ink, someone had written, "If I can't, you must." His chest tightened. These coordinates, Big Sur, mean something. Maya frowned. That's Bixby Creek Bridge territory, middle of nowhere. Can you trace this number? He handed her his phone, showing the message that had arrived last night. She checked it and frowned. It's an encrypted VoIP line, probably a burner. But I can tell you this, whoever sent it is masking their location through a VPN connected to one of your own companies. Julian went cold. One of mine, Mercer Urban, she said, the construction division. That name sent a pulse of unease through him. Mercer Urban had built half the city's new developments using subcontractors he'd never met. Elena Rivera's name suddenly echoed differently in his mind. After Maya left, Julian called his lawyer, but before he could finish the sentence, the line cut. His email app blinked with a warning, "Unauthorized login detected." Within seconds, his entire system locked him out. He stared at the frozen screen until a new message flashed across it. "Stop digging. She's safer if you forget." Julian paced the room, pulse racing. Ava watched him from the staircase, clutching the tin locket. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. "No," he said, forcing calm. "You did everything right." That night, when Ava finally fell asleep again, Julian sat at his desk, opening the locket one more time. He copied the coordinates into a map search. The screen filled with an image of the California coast jagged cliffs, deep green water, the long spine of Bixby Bridge curving into fog. He zoomed in closer. Just beyond the bridge, a dirt turnout marked with a faint trail led into redwoods. A label popped up, Private Land Mercer Holdings. He leaned back in his chair, stunned. Why would she send me to my own property? He printed the map and pinned it above his desk. Beneath it, he wrote one word. Why? The next morning before sunrise, a black SUV idled across the street. Julian watched it through the slats of his blinds, every nerve alert. He texted Marcus to check the plates, but by the time Marcus replied, the SUV had vanished. When he turned around, Ava stood in the doorway, holding a new drawing. This one showed a bridge, a locket, and 3 stick figures standing in the fog. She said the bridge is where it all started, Ava whispered. Julian crouched to her level. Who did my mom? Elena. She said you'd know what to do once you heard the truth. He didn't know what truth waited at that bridge, but he knew one thing: his past was catching up fast, and the little girl in his house was the only key to unlocking it. Outside, dawn broke pale over San Francisco, washing the city in silver light. Julian reached for his coat and the car keys. The coordinates burned in his mind like a heartbeat. Whatever waited at Big Sur wasn't just a memory, it was a reckoning. And he intended to face it. By Monday morning, Julian Mercer's face was everywhere. A grainy photo, him stepping out of his gate. Ava, half hidden behind him. Harbor trotting close was plastered across gossip blogs, and business news sites alike. Billionaire hides secret child, screamed one headline. Another read, The Mercer Mansion Mystery. The board called an emergency meeting at Salesforce Tower. Julian stood at the head of the table, the city glittering behind him, while 12 people who owed their fortunes to him now looked at him like he was a liability. Julian, said Robert Gaines, the oldest member, and one of the most ruthless, you're trending for all the wrong reasons. A child shows up in your mansion and you vanish for 48 hours. Optics like that sink companies. Julian's jaw tightened. I'm handling it. Then handle it quietly, Gaines said. Sign the statement, say she's a relative of an employee. End it. I'm not lying about her, Julian said. A ripple of irritation moved through the room. Gaines leaned forward. Then, what exactly are you telling us? That some stranger and her kid walked into your house and you suddenly care? You don't even know who she is. Julian's voice dropped. I'm beginning to. When the meeting ended, he walked straight out without a word. Down in the parking garage, his phone buzzed. It was Maya Chen. You need to see this, she said. I went through public records on Elena Rivera. She worked as a medical interpreter at Zuckerberg's San Francisco General for 5 years. But here's the part you don't know. She also volunteered at a legal aid clinic in the Mission, helping undocumented workers file labor abuse claims. Guess who one of the accused contractors was? Julian already knew the answer. Mercer Urban, he said quietly. Yeah, Maya replied, and the subcontractor tied to it vanished a week after she filed her report. Julian gripped the phone tighter. You think she was targeted? I think she was scared, Maya said. There's a paper trail emails to an assistant in your company asking for a meeting with you. Then nothing. He ended the call staring out over the city. The sun glared against the glass towers like accusation. For the first time, Julian wondered what kind of empire he had really built and how much of it was resting on someone else's pain. That afternoon, he drove to the Mission District. The clinic was a narrow 2-story building between a taqueria and a laundromat. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed above cracked tile floors. A volunteer recognized Elena's name and directed him to the back room. Father Miguel handles her case files, the woman said. He still comes by on Mondays. Julian found him sorting paperwork near a row of folding chairs. The priest's collar was slightly crooked, his hands ink-stained from too many forms. Father Miguel Julian asked, I'm looking for information about Elena Rivera. The older man looked up, eyes sharp. You must be Julian Mercer. Julian froze. You know me. She talked about you. Miguel said, setting down his pen. Said you tried to help once before you forgot. Julian's breath caught. Forgot. Miguel studied him, then nodded slowly. She believed you had a good heart, Mr. Mercer, that you didn't know what your company was funding. When she found out the people exploiting her clients were connected to Mercer Urban, she wanted to bring you proof. But she said if anything happened, the girl would know where to go. Julian felt the air thin around him, and she disappeared. Miguel nodded. The same week, she planned to testify. Julian left the clinic with a file folder the priest pressed into his hand. Emails, witness statements, a faded copy of a complaint stamped received. He sat in his car and flipped through the pages until the letters blurred. Somewhere between the lines of legal language, he saw the face of a woman who believed he could make things right. When he returned home, Ava was in the kitchen coloring on a paper towel. She looked up as he entered, her expression searching his. Did you find my mom? Not yet, he said softly, but I found people who remember her. Ava nodded, then stared down at her drawing again. She always said bad people hide behind good buildings. Her words landed heavier than she knew. That night, as rain began to fall again, Julian sat by the piano. He didn't play. He just stared at the keys the folder open beside him, his company's logo stamped across every page like a confession. He made his decision around midnight. The next morning, he called an emergency press conference. The PR team begged him to reconsider, but he didn't. When the cameras clicked and flashes hit his eyes, he didn't flinch. "I built Mercer Urban to shape the future of this city," he said, voice steady. "But somewhere along the way, I stopped asking who paid the price for it. A woman named Elena Rivera tried to show me the truth. I didn't listen. Now I'm listening." The room buzzed, reporters firing questions, but he didn't answer them. He turned off the mic and walked out. When he reached the street, Maya was waiting by her car. "You just blew up your board," she said. "Then maybe it needed blowing up," he replied. They drove in silence toward Golden Gate Park. Ava sat in the back seat, humming softly, Harbor asleep beside her. At the carousel, Julian bought her a ticket. She didn't smile. Halfway through the ride, she climbed off her horse and ran into his arms, burying her face in his coat. For the first time, she cried. "I thought being brave meant not crying," she whispered. Julian knelt, holding her tight. "No, being brave means not running away." When they got home, he spread the map across the kitchen counter. The coordinates still burned in his mind, Bixby Creek Bridge. Whatever waited there, he knew. It was the end of a story he should have never forgotten. He called Maya. "Pack a bag," he said. "We're going to Big Sur." And somewhere in the corner of his silent mansion, the motion sensors blinked red for the first time in days. Someone or something was watching again. The Pacific Coast Highway curved like a blade along the cliff's fog, hanging low over the restless water. Julian drove with both hands tight on the wheel, the map folded on the seat beside him. Ava sat in the back, her chin resting on Harbor's back, watching the coastline slide past in shades of blue and gray. Maya followed in her own car behind them, headlights cutting through the mist like small, steady promises. They had left San Francisco before dawn. Every mile south felt like shedding another layer of the life Julian once knew. The board, the headlines, the money, it all seemed to belong to someone else. What mattered now was the locket, the coordinates, and the truth waiting where the land met the sea. By the time they reached the turnout near Bixby Creek Bridge, the fog had thinned. The air smelled of salt and eucalyptus, sharp and clean. Julian parked beside a weathered trail sign, the kind only locals noticed. The coordinates on his phone matched exactly. "This is it," Maya said, as she stepped out, pulling her jacket close. Ava climbed from the back seat, holding the paper crane she never went anywhere without. She said, "The bridge listens if you play the right song." Julian's pulse stumbled. "The song." She nodded. "The one you played for her. The one that made her promise you'd remember." They followed the narrow path down toward a clearing hidden among redwoods. The air grew cooler, the sound of the ocean rising like breath. Then Julian saw a small cabin roof, sagging under moss, but still standing. A rusted mailbox out front read E. Rivera. Inside, dust floated in slow motion through the pale light. There was a small wood stove, 2 mugs on the counter, and against the far wall a baby grand piano, its varnish cracked but keys intact. A folded note sat on the lid. Julian's hands trembled as he opened it. "Play the song." He sat. The bench creaked under his weight. Ava stood beside him, watching. For a long moment he just stared at the keys, the memories flickering like a reel, fighting to restart. Then his fingers moved hesitant, then sure. The first notes of Gymnopédie No. 1 filled the cabin, soft and haunting. As he played, images came rushing back. The church hall at Glide Memorial, Elena's laughter echoing between stained glass, her hand on his shoulder as she whispered, "You don't need to fix the world, Julian. Just don't forget the people in it." Ava clapping beside her. The smell of rain on the street that night. The promise he'd made and then lost somewhere between ambition and accident. When the last note faded, silence filled the cabin, heavy but alive. Julian turned to see Ava holding something she'd found wedged behind the piano's soundboard, a small flash drive taped in place. Maya took it, sliding it into her laptop. The screen flickered to life with folders, dates, contracts, payment records. And then a video. Elena sat in a modest office, hair tied back, eyes steady. "If you're seeing this," she said, "then I didn't make it to Monterey. The files prove the construction network using my clients' names for ghost workers. They're laundering through Mercer Urban Shell accounts. Julian doesn't know. He tried to help once before he forgot. If I can't finish this, he will." Ava's eyes welled. She knew she whispered. Julian couldn't speak. His throat burned. The sound of the ocean outside felt louder, closer, like it was demanding something of him. Then tires crunched on gravel outside. Maya's head snapped up. "We're not alone." Through the narrow window, Julian saw the flash of a black SUV pulling up beside the trail. 3 men stepped out, led by Robert Gaines. The board member's sharp suit looked out of place against the dirt and fog. Julian Gaines called voice calm but edged with warning. "We should talk." Julian stepped outside, keeping Ava behind him. "You sent the messages." Gaines smiled faintly. "We needed you to stop digging, but since you didn't, we'll do this another way. Hand over the drive." Maya appeared in the doorway, laptop clutched tight. "You'd destroy it." Gaines shrugged. "Of course. It's the only way this empire survives." Julian's temper broke. "You mean your profits survive? Elena was trying to protect people you built your fortune on. You tried to bury her. She knew the risks," Gaines said. "So do you." Before Julian could answer, Harbor barked a low warning sound that sliced through the standoff. The noise startled one of the men who reached inside his coat. Julian moved without thinking, stepping between Ava and the danger. "Enough," he said. "This ends now." Maya lifted her phone. "Already sent the files," she said. "Every journalist, every federal contact I have. Even if you kill us, they'll go live in 10 minutes. For the first time, Gaines hesitated. His jaw tightened, calculation flickering behind his eyes. Then he turned, signaling to his men. "Let's go." The SUV backed down the path tires, spraying gravel until it disappeared into the fog. Julian stood still, heart pounding. Ava's small hand found his. "You didn't let them win," she said. He looked down at her, then at the cabin that had held so many ghosts. "No," he said softly. "Your mother didn't either. They stayed until sunset." Maya backed up the files to 3 separate drives. Julian walked the perimeter once more, finding the remnants of a campfire and an old thermos beside a fallen log. Inside was a scrap of paper in Elena's handwriting for Ava. "Tell her the world is still kind." He folded it carefully and placed it inside the locket. As they drove north again, the cliffs fell away behind them, and the lights of the bridge reappeared through the mist. Julian felt the weight of the past settle, but not as punishment. As purpose. The truth was no longer hidden. Elena's promise had been kept. In the rearview mirror, Ava slept with Harbor's head in her lap. For the first time in years, Julian smiled without forcing it. The fog lifted just enough to see the horizon, and somewhere deep inside, he knew the story wasn't ending. It was only finally beginning to mean something. The headlines shifted from scandal to salvation in less than a week. What started as Mercer's secret child mystery became Mercer exposes corruption inside his own empire. Federal agents raided 3 offices tied to Mercer Urban. Arrests followed. And while lawyers argued and reporters speculated, Julian Mercer stood on a temporary stage in Union Square not as a billionaire defending himself, but as a man who had finally decided who he wanted to be. "I built my fortune on the idea that progress can't wait," he told the crowd. "But I forgot that people can't wait either. A woman named Elena Rivera reminded me that innovation means nothing if it leaves humanity behind. Today, I'm starting over. Not just for her, but because of her." He announced the creation of the Harbor Initiative, named after the small dog now famous on social media for sitting beside him at every public appearance. The program would fund legal aid for exploited workers, scholarships for medical interpreters, and transitional housing for single parents in crisis. For the first time, his applause didn't sound like a business deal. It sounded like belief. When the press conference ended, he turned off his phone, walked through the crowd, and didn't look back. That night, he drove to the hospital in Monterey where Elena Rivera's name had last appeared on record. Her patient file had been closed weeks ago. Status unknown. But the attending nurse, after a long silence, said she remembered a woman who looked like Elena being transferred under protective custody. It wasn't confirmation, but it was enough. There was still hope. Ava waited for him in the lounge, coloring on the floor, with a box of new crayons someone had donated. She looked up as he entered, eyes searching his. "Did they find her?" "Not yet," he said gently, "but they're trying." Ava nodded, small and steady. "Mom always said you finish what you start." Julian smiled. "Then, I guess I still have work to do." Over the following weeks, the mansion in Pacific Heights no longer felt like a museum. The lights stayed on past midnight. The smell of cocoa and cinnamon filled the kitchen, and a child's laughter echoed through the same halls that once only held silence. Ava's drawings covered the refrigerator bridges, oceans of piano, and a stick figure man in a blue suit always standing beside her. The city, too, began to look different to him. He saw the faces he used to pass without noticing: the janitors cleaning after hours, the food couriers waiting in the rain, the woman at the coffee shop who smiled even when no one said thank you. The world hadn't changed, but he had finally started to see it. When the Harbor Initiative officially opened its first center downtown, Maya stood beside him, holding a microphone for local news. "You've lost millions in stock value, Julian," she teased lightly. "No regrets, none," he said. "For once, I'm investing in something that can't be bought." She smiled. "You mean people?" He looked toward the corner where Ava was showing Harbor to a group of children. "Exactly." One quiet afternoon, he took Ava to Crissy Field. The bay stretched wide and blue gulls circling overhead. She ran ahead, hair whipping in the wind chalk dust still on her fingers from drawing in the morning. When she stopped, she turned and shouted, "Race you to the bridge." He let her win. When she reached him again, breathless and bright, she held out a new drawing. It was their house, his house, bathed in sunlight. Beside it, 3 stick figures stood holding hands, Ava, her mother, and him. She said, "You'd stay," Ava whispered, almost shy. "I'm here," he said, "and I'm not going anywhere." Later that evening, Julian sat by the piano with Ava curled beside him, Harbor asleep at their feet. He lifted the fallboard and played the familiar notes of Gymnopédie No. 1. This time he didn't see loss. He saw connection, the invisible thread between past and present, between what he had built and what he was still learning to rebuild. When the last note faded, Ava rested her head on his arm. "Do you think she hears it?" she asked. "I do," he said, "and I think she's proud of you." Ava traced the edge of the locket hanging around her neck. Inside, the scrap of Elena's handwriting rested safely. For Ava. "Tell her the world is still kind." Julian watched her close her eyes, the locket glinting softly in the light. He had spent half his life chasing meaning through achievement, but sitting there with a child who believed in him before he believed in himself, he finally understood what legacy really meant. A week later, a letter arrived at his office. No return address, no signature, just a plain envelope postmarked from Santa Fe. Inside was a photograph of a desert sunrise and a short message written in looping script. "She's safe. Keep your promise." Julian folded the letter slowly, a quiet breath of relief leaving his chest. He didn't need more than that. Months passed. The world moved on, but the story lingered how a young billionaire had found a poor girl hiding in his mansion, and how her words had changed everything. People repeated it like a modern parable, a reminder that compassion could still rewrite the script of power. One evening, Julian stood on the balcony as the city lights shimmered below. Ava was inside singing softly to Harbor, her voice drifting through the open door. He closed his eyes and thought about the woman who had trusted him with more than evidence, with a child, a legacy and a lesson he'd carry for the rest of his life. He whispered into the night, "I kept the promise you don't remember." From inside, Ava's small voice called back, "I remember now, and I'm keeping it with you." He turned toward the light, toward the sound of her laughter echoing through the house that had finally become a home. The past no longer haunted him. It guided him. And for the first time since that stormy night, Julian Mercer knew exactly who he was, not the billionaire who built towers out of glass, but the man who learned how to stay, how to love, and how to begin again. When the story of Julian Mercer finally settled into the quiet corners of public memory, it stopped being about wealth, mystery, or even scandal. It became something far more enduring, a story about rediscovery. A man who once measured his life in numbers and acquisitions found himself reborn through a child's trust and a woman's unfinished promise. From the moment he found Ava Grace hiding in his mansion, drenched and frightened, the course of his life shifted from control to compassion. What began as a strange intrusion became the invitation he had unknowingly been waiting for, to feel again, to remember again, to live again. Julian's transformation didn't happen in one dramatic gesture, but through a series of quiet reckonings. The coordinates carved on a locket led him not just to Big Sur, but to the truth buried within his own empire. Every step toward Elena Rivera's memory stripped away another layer of arrogance until only a man remained flawed, grieving but willing to change. And when the lies that built his fortune finally collapsed, he did something that few men in his position would ever do. He chose truth over power. Through Ava, Julian rediscovered the lost art of presence. He learned that saving someone isn't about wealth or strategy. It's about showing up, listening, and staying when it's hardest to stay. He learned that legacy isn't measured in square footage or investment returns, but in the lives we quietly repair. When he launched the Harbor Initiative, he didn't just redeem his company, he redeemed himself. And through that redemption, he gave Elena's sacrifice a purpose that would outlive them all. As for Ava, the child who carried the courage of 2 lifetimes, she became the bridge between what Julian had forgotten and what he needed to remember. Her words, "I kept the promise you don't remember," turned from a mystery into a creed. They reminded him that promises are the threads that hold us to our better selves, even when memory fails. Together, they built not a new empire, but a family. The house that once echoed with silence now sang with laughter music, and the quiet confidence that the past no longer owned them. And perhaps that is what makes this story so deeply human. It isn't about a billionaire saving a poor girl. It's about 2 souls, one jaded by success, the other scarred by loss, finding grace in each other's brokenness. It reminds us that the world doesn't change because of grand gestures. It changes because someone decides to care when it's easier not to. For those watching, the message is clear: redemption is never out of reach. No matter how far we've drifted from who we meant to be, one small act of courage, one moment of compassion can set us back on course. The wealth that truly matters can't be bought. It's earned in empathy, rebuilt in forgiveness, and shared in kindness. Julian's story challenges us to look at our own lives and ask, what promises have we forgotten to keep? And more importantly, who might we become if we kept them? If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of something you'd forgotten in yourself, then stay with us. Subscribe to this channel, share this story, and help us continue creating the kind of stories that remind the world of what truly matters: love, hope, and the power of second chances. Your support gives us the strength to keep telling stories that reach the heart. Because somewhere out there, someone still needs to hear the next one.